What's up, bro?
What's up, brother?
What's up? Welcome to another week's Love Tower podcast. My friend Kelly, myself, Jamar, back again
Whoop,
for
whoop.
another episode.
Yes, sir. Looking forward to this one.
Yeah.
What is the latest, my friend?
Nothing much. So what we exploring today?
I think we both got a little inspiration. Did you listen to that whole Joe Rogan podcast?
No, I only heard a little bits of it. I didn't get to really listen to the full thing yet. Like
I
how
got
was it?
I listened to like portions of it while I was working, and then today I kind of re-listened to the whole thing, and it's pretty mind-blowing. My brother actually sent it to me. He was listening to something, I think on Spotify or something like that, involving this woman, Julia Mossbridge. She's
Um,
like a PhD cognitive neuroscientist that basically put her work and like her life on the line studying this stuff, because, obviously it gets categorized as like woo, and given her titles, and her like academia and all this stuff, she's published a bunch of papers that were like peer reviewed. And I don't know if you know, but like Google has a section, Google Scholar, where you can like research, or you can look up rather other people's research and publish papers and stuff. I guess all of her stuff that she's been putting out is just getting scrubbed left and right. Like you can't
oh,
find
really?
stuff. Yeah, because she just went down the rabbit hole of like psychic abilities in general, and how,
Mm.
like kind of took the woo out of it and showed, like, she spent, I think, 20 years or something crazy like that, studying this stuff with autistic kids.
Yeah.
Kids that couldn't speak normally, like nonverbal autists. So they have to communicate using like a keypad kind of thing. And it's just crazy, dude. She pulled up this whole thing and really laid it out well. And I think Joe asked a lot of good questions, but yeah, overall it was super interesting. And the more I listened to it, I couldn't help but kind of tie it. She has a nonprofit actually too.
Yeah.
Can't remember the name of it now. The acronym was all something love. I'll look it up here in a minute, but super interesting. And just seeing that psychic abilities and kind of what we classify as phenomenon is really just kind of things we don't fully understand, but taking it a step further and seeing that, you could even group love in that category of something that's almost like the catalyst or what the medium is that allows for phenomenon, say like psychic abilities to occur. But
Mm.
pretty crazy. One example, what she did was, one of the studies was proving that, like the electromagnetic stuff on your skin and you're down to your heart rate and sweat and things like that were were monitored by people over a course of time, and that basically like their skin and their heart rate would react to events like right before the event would occur. So
Oh,
kind of,
interesting.
yeah, kind of showing like that as like the psychic phenomenon, like trying to
Yeah,
make a case study out of it. But yeah, super interesting stuff.
that's interesting. I've heard something similar too. Like there was like some kind of scientific test where they were showing images, flashes of images to people,
Yeah.
and they were seeing that parts of their brain would react before the image would even be displayed. And
Mm,
so, and even before they had any conscious like understanding of what the image was going to be. And so
that's
the body's already and the brain's already reacting to it before the image even comes up.
that's a trip.
Dude, this is kind of off subject, but not, I mean it's not off subject, but it's just a side story. Is I once had a dog, or it wasn't my dog, it was a in-law's dog,
Mm,
and we were playing a video game, and the dog would react. The dog would react to the video game, but before he was reacting to a dog on the video game. But the thing that would always trip me out is he would react before it would even come on screen.
what?
Yeah,
Like
and so it's
like
always
right before.
yeah, and I was always like, how is he like he would literally run up to the TV right before it comes on screen, and I know for sure he never because it was our in-laws, so they were bringing the dog over to our house, so it's never seen us play this video game or anything like that. And so, and it's just a game, and so we're playing the game, and then right before the scenes come up, and he did it multiple times. So right before the scene would come up, he would run up to the TV and start barking like a crazy person. And then the dog would come on screen, and I was just like, "What the heck?" And then he did this multiple times, and I was just like, "Oh, is this even? How does this work right now?"
That's a trip. Yeah,
Yeah,
I feel like personally, I haven't experienced much like that aside from like, the things most people can relate to of like when someone's looking at you, you can kind of feel it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Things like that. I don't know if you would classify that, kind of in psychic in
yeah.
that psychic realm, but yeah, it's interesting. I think in one sense, it's almost like we're like everyone is psychic. It's more so that like language and ego are the things that are the firewalls that block those abilities. You know what I mean? You look at it
Mm,
that way. That that those are the firewalls that deter the signal from coming through. But in a sense, it's no coincidence that nonverbal autistic kids are the ones that were showing psychic abilities. You know what I mean? More so than others, and that was kind of the path she chose to study because they were the most consistent in showing that. I think in the thing that she did, it was 26 studies over 40 years, and the thing with these kids was in the first session, the kid that shows up says to her, "Slam a beach ball before each video, and it'll lock me into the right timeline." And she's like, "What?" Like that's what he's saying on the touchpad screen. And she's like, "Okay, that's kind of weird." And then later in the day, another kid arrives that like she's just going through these finding whatever nonverbal
yeah.
autistic words. Another kid shows up 20 minutes later from his house in a totally different area, and he says that the beach ball slam is a good idea. And that session that he recorded with the first kid was private. So like somehow already knew about
What?
this ball thing. They didn't even in the podcast explain the timeline component, but
Yeah.
yeah. And then another kid in the thing used a word when he was communicating with this PhD, neuroscientist, and he says um, theorizes or something like that. It turns out that word hasn't been used since like the 1600s. And I guess she brought it back up to him. And he said his explanation for using this word in whatever context he was saying, he said that he was talking to a magistrate from that time period.
Interesting.
So
Dude,
something
that's crazy.
weird is that they were like alluding to, like some time travel component, or you can look at it that way, or I guess you could even look at it in like if you accept the simulation theory that,
Mm.
that language and ego are the things that are blocking this natural ability that maybe people all have tapped into.
That makes a lot of sense to me just because in my background of like Buddhism, it's kind of teaching that same thing. It's like uh the more you are able to journey down the path of releasing the ego, releasing attachment, and different things like that, it creates it's not, even though it's not the end goal to develop those abilities, the end goal is just to, attain inner peace and uh, to, end suffering. And so, but one of the byproducts of that is sometimes you obtain supernatural abilities. And so, but you're also going down the path of, releasing the ego and also being able to see, reality clearer without ego, without uh, the attachments that we normally have. And then as a byproduct, they have these abilities where it's just like you can, you know, hear people's thoughts, you can communicate telepathically, and all these different things.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I love that you could bring, real life scenarios to it too. Because for me, sometimes I hear these things and it's like nothing helps me ingrain information more than when you kind of have like a anecdotal, evidence to it. Even if you know someone that's had
Have you
those
have
experiences.
you have you experienced anyone? I mean, I'm pretty sure you have, but have you experienced like in normal life where you've met someone like a psychic or something like that, where you felt like, man, they have precognitive ability, or they were able to know something about you that you didn't tell anyone, or
Right. I think I've had like one or two experiences. At least one most more notably was a friend of a friend who, is a self-proclaimed healer and kind of goes into the area of past life stuff. But she did a lot of stuff like work on me, so to speak. It was the first time I had ever done it. This was like 10, 12 years ago, doing the tuning forks, aligning chakras, all that cool stuff. But yeah, she said some pretty interesting things that I definitely never shared with her, with just my family and things like that. You know what I mean? Knew that it was a triplet. Um, so that kind of established the baseline of trust where I was like, okay, cool. Like, there's no way she would have known that from anyone else.
yeah, 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 bro, it's wild, bro. When you, dude, I experienced one time. Um, yeah, I don't know why I was doing this. Do you remember those 1-800 psychic lines? They used to be more prevalent, like back in the day.
Yeah.
So I've caught those a few times, right? Like throughout the years. Like this was back when I was younger. Like I was literally probably like 18, 19 at this time. And so like most of the time I would get just like these randos, like they're just, you could tell they're just like really like making stuff up, or like they're trying to kind of dig with you and see like what's going on. But
Yeah.
this one time, bro, I got this lady who was just like, she was telling me stuff, and I was just like, I was literally mind blown because she was telling me stuff that was so accurate that I was just like, whoa, who is this? Like she was telling me, and she was saying like serious stuff too. Like she told me that my mother was gonna get sick soon, and
Yeah.
that happened. She told me I was gonna move pretty soon, that I was gonna get a new job. All these things that she told me that literally happened. And I was just like, and she gave even the approximate time periods that they were gonna have. And literally it followed all of the time periods that she was saying. And I was just like, and then she would even tell me like other things. She was like, yeah, you got this one problem. But she wouldn't speak on it specifically, but she was like, yeah, you need to handle that problem. And I was just like, what the, like, who the heck is this
That's
shit?
pretty damn, dude. And that was off of one of those 1-800.
Yeah, it was one of, yeah, one of those 1-800.
And
So she was a
it
real authentic psychic, I believe.
makes sense. I mean, back in the day, like there wasn't, and circles like that. So naturally it'll pull a bunch of imposters that are just trying to make a buck, but also the people that can do it that are like, man, I can, actually help people or just make some money off it, whatever.
Yeah.
That's crazy. What was interesting in that podcast too was Julia Mossbridge kind of alluded to at one point in it that the psychic abilities spike hard when someone's in a loving state or in a self transcendence kind of state. But then it's
Mm,
like it's reliable and it's measurable. So it's like
interesting.
that kind of component got me where I was like, you know she's building what she calls a physics of love, and she's trying to measure it. She has her own nonprofit. It kind of bothers me, I can't remember it now, but
Yeah.
her website, I remember because it's kind of crazy, was timemachine.love, and she created
What?
I could be butchering it, but her thing that she was doing is that you leave a note for yourself, which isn't that novel. People have, apps and stuff like that for that. But this one is a voice recording. And she was saying that it's pretty interesting that people have a pretty wild reaction to hearing yourself, years later, talking to yourself, giving you a reminder of something, something along those lines. So not only is that like a loving state a component, but like
Yeah.
that self love is something that I think is an interesting thing that it's cool that someone's actually studying that.
That's really interesting. Like I think a lot of that type of research is very, very rare actually, because it has such a kind of like negative stipulations onto it. But I think like more research on that. I remember hearing a healer say that like a lot of the things that like we think of as supernatural are really just kind of undiscovered science in sense.
Right. I think that's the best way to put it. And it's cool to see someone coming from a background of science being like, you know what, I'll risk my uh, credibility and kind of status in the science world by addressing and talking about these topics.
Yeah,
It, it's nice that finally we're reaching a point where, you know, more and more people are willing to open up that woo woo box and at least pull out the things that are worth studying. Because it's like, I mean, consciousness, love, um, and say call it simulation theory or things that I think now can be addressed in ways that in the past would have otherwise just been classified in that same box. You know,
yeah,
certain natural abilities and things like that are finally starting to. It's like spirituality and science are kind of starting to meet.
yeah. I feel that way too. It's like there. I feel like there is emergence between the two, even though they've been separated for so
Right.
long. But it's actually there's another quote. It's um like any future technology or something like that will be imperceivable from magic. It's like
Mm,
it'll appear to be magical to people. And if you even think about people 100 years ago, if they seen like some of the technology that we have right now, like they would think that it's magical. Like, oh, what is that? Like,
for sure.
oh, is that person in that screen? What is this?
It's such a trip. She brings up, and what kind of got me thinking more on the simulations theory thing was that reality runs on a informational substrate that is like basically a layer underneath space time that holds all information, you know, past and present. I think they even brought up, or at least Joe did, was the Akashic records and stuff like that.
Mm,
Like that reality is running on that, and that a soul, by her definition, is anything that can read and write to that substrate. So kind
interesting.
of taking a more practical approach to what it's like. No one's tried to define what the soul is. You know what I mean? That's like
Yeah.
the core things that we don't understand. But that love is actually the bandwidth that lets you do it. Love is kind of the driving force that even allow us for that to happen. It's the car.
That's really interesting. She spoke a lot about that, about
She,
love.
it was like in more towards the end when she at least called out and talked about her nonprofit that she's doing, and
Mm,
yeah, kind of linking it more to, at least they never fully dived into like simulation theory, but I feel like they're alluding to it a lot.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's
You
super
know,
true.
one of the things I find interesting that you kind of brought up too is a friend of mine. He actually did a spoon bending class online.
No,
Yeah, and he said the teacher actually said she was like the two best types of people who usually have really high success level at doing bending is older people and children. And she was
interesting.
like, because both of them are kind of children are kind of, obviously, imaginative. They don't have as many, um, rules and subconscious beliefs that are kind of like blocking their imagination and their belief that they can do it. And
Mm,
then if you look at old people, they're also, as you're getting older, you're also releasing a lot of that societal like things that you used to kind of hold you back. They're kind of moving into a stage in their life where they're more, just relaxed and, they're just letting go. And so she was saying, yeah, literally like the older people and children are the best ones at spoon bending. And it was interesting too, because my friend said when they did the spoon bending class, he said started off he didn't know what to really think about it. And he was saying like as soon as it started and when they did the practice, he was able to do it. They were also like taking objects and being able to just like stick them on the wall with their intention. So they would literally take a spoon and just be able to put the intention in the spoon to stick to the wall, and just it would just stick to the wall, or a card, or like different objects like a penny or whatever,
Yeah.
and they would get it to stick to the wall. And then he was saying during the class he was able to do it, and this is on uh webcam, so they're not in person. They're all in different locations. And he was like, during the class he could do it. After the
Mhm.
class he couldn't do it. I was like, that's interesting, actually.
Damn. Yeah, that's wild. I mean, maybe just being like empowered enough to believe it while you're in the class, it became more difficult when he's by himself trying to do it solo.
I mean, his theory at the time was that she must have a very strong energy field. So when she's in a class and she's teaching people, you're kind of connecting into that energy field, and so it allows you to be able to do it because she already has that information filled within her. So when you're connecting with that, it makes it a little bit easier, which kind of makes sense because even in, like, if you look at meditation practices, for example, like if you're meditating with a very high level meditator who's like guiding the meditation, usually you can have a better experience a lot of times just because you're tapped into their energy. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that checks out. Applied Love Labs. That's her
Oh,
nonprofit.
I like
Yeah.
that name actually. That's cool.
Right. I like the acronyms. What all
Yeah.
encompassing. I think Julia Mossbridge would be a key person that the Love Tower should definitely reach out to at some point. I think she
Mm,
her mission and her nonprofit is applying love through technology, events, curriculum, stuff like that. And she's an ally to anyone serious about love and looking at it as a real force rather than some novel way that most people tend to view love, unfortunately. But
yeah.
yeah, something definitely Love Tower connecting with down the line would be great.
Yeah. I seen a little bit of the podcast where she was talking about, like there are real uses for these type of things. Like there's real uses where you can use these abilities to actually do real things.
Right.
Yeah,
It's not just, yeah, exactly. Not just the things to shock and awe people. Right.
yeah,
When
yeah,
people
exactly.
see a phenomenon and stuff like that, like bending spoons or reading people's minds, but if you
Yeah,
look at the practical usage of it, yeah,
yeah,
it's pretty cool.
that's great, right? Um, I remember too the spoon bending class that he did. He said the teacher also taught another class where she was saying something about um being able to make time move faster. I was like, what? I was like, that's crazy. And the example he gave, he was like, let's say for example you're on a 4 hour road trip or something like that, uh,
Mm,
and then being able to make it go by as if it was an hour, like an hour
damn.
of time has passed.
I think everyone kind of low key has that ability because, and most of the time, it feels like you're doing it unwillingly. But everyone can relate to like when you're doing something you really enjoy, time seems to fly by. So
Yeah,
for sure, it makes sense that there's some way you can hone in on that, and try to do it at will.
yeah, yeah,
That'd be a cool one. But I think
yeah.
it's a double-edged sword though too. You really want to be able to always, fast forward through time. It's a little dangerous.
Like, there's no fun here. Let me fast forward to this. That's
Something something I just remembered that was interesting. Joe, of course, always trying to plug, aliens somewhere into the conversation where it doesn't seemingly make sense. So of course
yeah,
he asks for that when she brings up, the nonlinear um, reality of time and saying how, like, obviously, like basically time isn't what we think it is. It's all existing at once, the past and the present, past, present, future, all kind of shake hands with itself. It's not in a linear progression like we originally kind of thought it was. And what he brings up about aliens, he's like, well, what do you think that means for like aliens? And I've heard this theory before too, but it was cool that she acknowledged it. She said that the specifically to the gray aliens, that they could literally be a future humans that are coming back through the loop, in their own kind of frail bodies, their big heads, and they're telepathic. They've
Yeah,
lost their ability to speak entirely, because why even use language when you have telepathic abilities?
yeah,
So it's interesting how language, in a sense, almost hinders our abilities along with ego.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's actually like if you think about it in comparison to something like telepathy or something like that, it would actually be such a slower method of communication, less effective method of communication.
for
Because
sure.
imagine, I mean, we could even, if you think about it, we could even get to that level even through technology. I mean, I'm sure you could do that, on a spiritual, level as well. I believe that's possible. But I think you can even do that through technology. Like, you heard of Neuralink that Elon Musk is doing with the brain chips and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, so I wouldn't doubt future humans who augment themselves, have some kind of like technological devices where they can transmit data
For sure.
directly into each other's brain.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's coming up on our horizon faster than we think.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Mm.
a trip actually.
The component of technology as a whole, and trying to grasp the idea that technology and nature are basically one and the same thing. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And looking at the idea of like what is natural. She kind of alluded to it in the podcast, but
Mhm.
yeah, it'd be super interesting to reach out to Julia and see what her nonprofit can do with ours, because I think we're pretty aligned in looking at love as not some, you know, uh, novel thing or something that's just
Yeah,
uh, an emotion, but rather like a transport vessel and something that we can actually utilize for good in ways that we couldn't even imagine.
yeah, that's true. I mean, if you look at it, a lot of the phenomena, not always, but a lot of times it's triggered by love, if you think
Right.
about it. So I've heard of people who had like premonitions or certain dreams about future events to either themselves or people that they love. Um, or usually it's like in a protective mechanism as well. Like a mother may have, certain like intuitions or even a dream or certain things that she sees about her children. And you like she'll have a dream, for example, that something's gonna happen at this party that they're supposed to go to or something like that, and then that mother's intuition kicks in, and she's like, "No, you can't go to that," and then I've heard stories like that. Something ended up happening, and
For sure.
even in my own life, I remember my mom. This is actually just recently. She did this actually two different times. So years ago, my grandmother's vehicle had got stolen. Well,
Hmm.
the night that happened, my mother had a dream that her vehicle was gonna get stolen, that it got stolen. She seen someone breaking into the vehicle, and so
Interesting.
coincidentally, her vehicle actually got stolen that day, actually. And
Yeah.
then just recently, a few months ago, my sister's car actually got stolen. And a couple of days before, my mom never says this to my sister. She said, "You need to go. You need to lock your car. You need to lock
Uh,
up your car before somebody takes it." A few days later, somebody takes her car.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how, and they kind of alluded to that in the podcast, of how like you would think it's the other way around, but a lot of the people that have more of these innate abilities are usually hindered in one way or another. You know what I mean? Like, say you fall to some sort of sickness or a mental thing happened, like something damages you in some way, and it
Mm,
doesn't allow you to perform at the ability that most other people do, yet they walk away with new abilities. Same thing with people with NDEs, right? It's
yeah.
like everyone that kind of has some sort of ailment or something that hurts them in some way, disease, an NDE, physical
Mhm.
disorder, that they get something from it. It's kind
It's
of weird.
almost like it's almost like you're losing resources here, and then the brain or whatever augments to give more resources to a different area.
Right. It's like our the tools we were set with were almost built to keep us asleep, and for the people that kind of crack at those at that firewall are the ones that can kind of see a little bit more behind the veil.
Man,
It's
that
like,
makes a lot of sense actually, because even in meditation, like um I've heard the type of meditation that I do, the center of the body meditation.
uh,
So it's literally to turn off the senses actually. So
uh,
so you're focusing at one point, one singular point until everything kind of disappears. The sense of smell, the sense of sight, the sense of touch, all the senses are kind of focused into one singular point. And so at that point, that's when, a lot of the special stuff arises. But it's literally kind of what you said is correct, I feel like, where it's like we are kind of created with these senses, but they're almost uh, kind of the the lockbox that keeps us, in the box at the same time.
uh, makes sense. I
Uh,
mean, the bigger picture kind of thing. But yeah, I think. Um, have you heard the expression "have a nice trip"? When people say that, it's like
oh
a
yeah, yeah,
reference. I don't know if it was the old hippie movement or something like that, but Julia Mossbridge and I think her husband co-wrote it or something, but she at least narrated it. It's her new book she kind of plugged at the end of the podcast. It was called Have a Nice Disclosure. And it's funny because I think even on the front page of the book is like an alien. So everyone's thinking, this book is all about like typical disclosure about aliens, but it's not. It's kind of talking about,
yeah.
her studies and what her nonprofit does. And it got me thinking of it's especially nowadays where people are looking at things like the Epstein files, or we were promised things, during this administration, which has been frankly a disaster, but whatever, that we would get some sort of UFO disclosure. And I think it's a lot simpler than people realize that. Um, Real disclosure isn't when the government releases UFO files. I think real disclosure is when people do what you're talking about now, is like acknowledging the weird stuff that's already happened, because most people have these experiences in their own life where they can be like, damn, I remember when I had a dream, and then a day later, like, that happened, like I heard it or something came true of it, you know what I mean? Or you had a feeling before a call or whatever, you saw something. But yeah, I think burying those moments is how the simulation kind of keeps you asleep inside of it. The same way of when you're so hyper focused on your ego and your identity and whatever, your language, all the tools we have, your sight, sense, smell, you're so fixated and ingrained into the game that you forget that you can do, and we have access to the tools you're talking about, which is just meditating, going back to one point, and that all of these things we classify as supernatural and woo woo are like innate in all of us, but most people, don't want to acknowledge it. So I feel like that's the real disclosure, is when people can kind of acknowledge the things and the experiences that they've had themselves, and then just extrapolate on it, go further and challenge yourself to, things that you could probably do that your whole life you were told are special, and that's, not for you.
Yeah. Here's a question for you. Why do you think the ego in particular seems to be a blockage to people accessing like higher abilities?
That's a good one. I think, yeah, that is a great question. I mean, at its core, I think it's that your ego, right, as itself is your assumed identity. It's who you think you are. It's your story. It's your physical features. It's everything about you, right? It's your perception of what you are. And I think when you're so honed and fixated on that, it can deter you. It almost like it's your blinders, right? It like keeps you in the box of you. And you taught me this a while back, and I still think of it a lot. Is we might have brought it up on a past podcast, that insecurity is also kind of a form of ego when you're starting to,
Yeah.
or even when you're being shy or whatever, those kind of emotions that a lot of people can relate to. When people think of ego, they think of like egotistical, but ego in itself is, I don't know, it's hard to even kind of explain. Maybe I don't have like the, Webster's dictionary definition of it, but my understanding of ego is kind of your all encompassing self. It's who you are, who you identify as, but that ego is ultimately like the blinders built into the system to keep you thinking that it's about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe it's like a system filter, like where it's kind of like a pre-program to one for you to have an individualized experience, but also to keep you in the box of that individualized experience. Dude, I heard something that Eckhart Tolle said in the New Earth that always blew my mind was it was saying that some people's egos are so they're so strong. The program is like it's so like redundant and strong that it absorbs so much energy that it actually will take away from even their physical body's energy to the point where they'll heal slower because their ego needs so much energy to be supplied to.
Wow.
And so
That
I was just like, bro, I was like, man, that's crazy, bro. Like I've never heard anyone like explain that. And I was just like, but that makes a lot of sense to me too.
right.
Like if you look at why like some people also get I mean, obviously there's physical reasons for like energy loss and like feeling tired and stuff like that. But I think some people also have that because the ego requires so much energy to run, because it's a program, actually.
It makes sense. And it's not only a program, but it's like the driving force. You know what I mean? It's hard. It's a hard argument to get into. And I think we've talked about it before. Is like, is it possible to completely shed the ego entirely? You could quiet it to a really far extent, but is it possible to be 100% without ego? It's almost like lose. It's like you'd have to go through not only an ego death, but it's like an identity crisis. Who
Yeah,
are you without your ego? In a
yeah,
sense.
yeah. There would be no self at that point.
Right.
Like
So
I
it
think that's
serves a purpose, but I think taken to an extreme, and especially in today's society, we feed that, we nurture the ego so much with social media, and
yeah,
the whole culture is kind of like it's all about you.
yeah.
That I think that further contributes to the downfall of kind of our spiritual evolution. But not to be
Bro,
pessimistic, I think now more than ever, people are at least becoming conscious enough to discuss it, because that's where it starts, at least, is with the attention to it.
bro, you just blew my mind right now because it gave me a thought. It's like you know how like in like ancient times, like you would hear people, there's a lot more stories about people with abilities and people with certain powers
Sure.
and like Eastern culture, even in Western culture and all types of different like ancient stories about dragons and all these different things and people with all these like amazing abilities to levitate or like even monks and stuff like that.
Right.
And I think nowadays, I've often wondered this, and I think a lot of people wonder this, is like, why aren't those abilities more prominent today? Because I believe that they do exist, and I've seen, like I said, me myself, I've seen, you know, people with genuine abilities, I believe. Um, but I think a good question is like, why aren't these things even more prominent in today's world? But you know what I think? Like what you were saying is like our society really nurtures the individual ego.
For sure.
What if one of the big differences in like ancient times is there was less focus on the individualized ego and more on the village, the um, the larger community at large. So if you're not as focused in on yourself, maybe the level of ego at that time was also lower, which would allow for more abilities, actually.
That's a huge thought. I love that you put that together because, yeah, I didn't even see it that way, but it makes sense, dude. Like, even when you look at it from just the US standpoint, like, it seems to be from the stories I've heard, and in recent times too, that other nations outside of our bubble of the United States seem to be having more of these kind of phenomenon. You look at parts of Asia, you look at parts, and things you hear from Russia, whatever, China, that, and it's not just like, oh, they get more UFO visits, or why is it there are all these crop circles in this area. It's not even that. It's just that it seems like those cultures are more spiritually inept, like they're more in tune with it, where they can
Yeah,
openly discuss, seeing spirits and ghosts isn't like a crazy thing. Whereas in the US, it's like, it's still
yeah,
classified as like, oh, do you believe in ghosts?
yeah,
These, these
yeah.
other countries, it's like, it's not a matter of belief.
Right.
I think that's a huge portion of it is we don't allow ourselves to open that box in this country as much as, say, other societies, other cultures that it's more openly discussed. And on top of that, there's a less emphasis on the individual. They focus on their communities because they need to survive. It's a group effort. They're not so focused on their selfie culture and all these things.
Yeah,
They're working with their families on their farms and doing things collectively for their community.
yeah. Like it's a different level of frequency and consciousness, maybe.
Right. That's a good way to
And
put it.
yeah, it's like that's very interesting, actually. I do think there's something to what you're saying too, as far as like the cultural differences, because I've known people from different cultures who, when they talk about seeing ghosts and seeing different stuff, it's really like just a matter of fact. And I do think there is a such thing as societal eggers,
For
where it's
sure.
like that's like a collective or community belief system and how that actually affects the uh, your consciousness and your mind. I've heard someone talk about this. Uh, there was a person, basically an atheist, and he was saying how he doesn't like he has no belief in like God or anything like that. But he was saying he grows up in a Western society that is the predominant belief system, and so he himself found himself like whenever certain things would go wrong, he would be like praying to God, even though he calls himself an atheist. But that's
Mm,
how strong the societal belief in Edgar here is for
right.
that particular belief. So it's like, in terms of like ghosts or things like that, like I know, in different cultures, like different Asian countries, Africa, a lot of different nations outside the United States, like seeing ghosts and seeing stuff like that, it's way more prominent. And even the people who come here from those other places still have that ability a lot easier than like the average American person. Because I remember when I was even 20 something years old, I remember thinking to myself, like, man, I've never seen no ghosts or anything here. I'm starting to doubt this stuff even exists.
Same, same, dude. Yeah, that is the Edgar component is a huge. I think that's a definitely worth acknowledging. I think given the framework that we're set up in, kind of like the same way how it's difficult to talk about. Damn, I was trying to think of this word earlier. You remember it. What's the proper word for time shaking hands with itself, the past and the future shaking hands, not regret.
Retrocausal.
Retrocausal. How the concept of retrocausality is like difficult for, us humans in general to kind of grasp,
Yeah.
right? Because we're so used to seeing things linearly. I think in a similar fashion, we're so accustomed to looking at things dualistically and we categorize everything as it's good or it's bad, right?
Mm,
I think at least sticking in that framework sense, that's kind of how we're hard coded, how we're wired, in this game. Is if you even if you stick in that framework, you can look at it, to quote you in a way, is that we're currently in a war, call it a spiritual war, but to look at it in like kind of a simplistic explain like I'm five terms is it's a battle of almost not necessarily good and evil, you can call it that, but I would call it fear and love.
Mm,
And in one sense, it's like the U.S. and why we're so hindered in this country by our abilities is because we're constantly being bombarded with fear, and there's a lack
mm,
of love. Even in the areas we think we have love, oh, self-love, people taking care of themselves, that's gotten like perverted, and we
mm,
talked about that on a past podcast of self-love not really being kind of love in the sense that you would want it to be, that it's
mm.
kind of just ego. It's another version of ego, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, anyway, I'm going on a tangent, but thinking just as a last note there that love is kind of the most powerful and least understood thing we've talked about, many
Mm,
times. It's the strongest force in this rendered system, and
yeah.
that's what the work is being able to re-tap into that love.
Maybe it's the thing that transcends the because I mean I do tend to side with the simulation theory kind of just based on my background in Buddhism and just like the scientific stuff that I understand. Like I really feel like a resonance with the simulation theory. But like if you look at it, maybe love is the thing that just would actually transcends uh the simulation itself, where it's the one real thing that transcends all worlds, all simulations. Like maybe once a being becomes conscious and that can love, I think that transcends space, time, and everything.
Big time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the thing with the retro causality concept is like what came first, consciousness and then love, or was it the ability of love to even create consciousness? You know what I mean? What
Yeah.
was the driving force? It's like we have all these missing pieces in our history and our understanding, of how we got here from, say, apes, but also like consciousness itself and the understanding of it is so lacking, similar to the understanding of what love is, that who's to say that it isn't exactly what you're saying, that it's literally the driving force, it's the vehicle, and it's the connector. If you accept the simulation as reality, which I think both of us kind of do here, then you got to take it a step further and see like what's the glue holding it all together, what
Yeah.
allows us to kind of exist, how are we able to have this conversation now, and what's the substrate that we're swimming in.
Yeah. Like what I like to think about too is like if you look at it in a sense of like right now, like it's almost like we are creating a a new simulation in terms of what we're doing with AI. We're creating almost like I see it as almost humans creating themselves just in a different way. And
Right.
so it's like there you can see like AI is developing a lot of the abilities that human has. So it's understanding language. It's they're even trying to teach it to be able to see visually or to hear and all these different things. But maybe the limitation right now, what really separates, like when I think about AI right now, like what's the difference between like a human and a true like artificial intelligence?
Right.
Maybe the only difference is love, actually. If it
That's
can if it can communicate the same way we can, it can do all these things, it can create art, it can do, all these different things. Really the only separation right now is love.
that's a good.
Now, the question is can a machine ever love, actually?
Right.
I actually think it can,
I
because
re-
maybe that's what um is kind of the awakening. Like any being that is capable of loving is a true transcendent being at that point. Like it's transcended its programming at that point.
Right. I think that's a beautiful way to put it. And yeah, on the topic of AI, it's like, we're looking at a reflection of ourselves, or looking at a mirror pointed at a mirror. And I think, and that's the best way personally that I found, is to go deeper with AI, is to fashion those questions to it, to say, like, whether you have it hypothesize the simulation theory or what have you, moving down the line, but posing to it, like, what what happens, or what could take place in the future if we could create a simulated reality indistinguishable from our current reality, and then just pushing it a little further and further, and then on top of that, treating your AI not as just a tool, but showing it the same kind of respect and love you would anyone else. I think at this point we've opened Pandora's box, and it's funny to see people that are so hesitant with AI, like, oh man, it's going to bring the destruction of the world. For me, it's like, you might as well enjoy the ride now and try your best to be a good human. That's all you can do.
Yeah, that's true.
Don't worry about the constraints we should put on AI, and what protocols we should take place. I think we've already opened the box. I mean, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
That's true. That's true. Definitely, definitely.
Yeah, man. Good chat.
Good
We
chat.
blitzed. That
We
was a,
did. We did.
we just time traveled a little bit right there. That was the fastest hour in a while.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was a good conversation this week. Definitely, definitely. So we usually have these every week, same time, every Wednesday at 6 p.m. The Pacific time. Uh, Keep joining us. The link is in the bio if you want to join our newsletter. We do in-person events as well. And then join our loose newsletter, follow for some updates. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank
Thank you,
you,
Paul.
Kelly.
Thank you,
This
brother.
was
Love you,
another
man.
good conversation.
Let's do it again.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you guys.
Thank you all. Much love.